On April 18, 2012, a 54-year-old farmer named Dale Hoffman stood in the parts department of Riverside Case IH in eastern Nebraska and signed the final paperwork for a brand new Quadtrac 500. The machine cost $387,000. He'd been doing business with Riverside for 22 years. His father had bought from them before that. Dale didn't negotiate the price. He didn't shop around. He trusted the handshake, the history, and the name on the building. The Quadtrac was supposed to pull his new 12-row planter and handle the deep tillage his heavy clay soil demanded. It was supposed to last 15 years. It lasted 18 months before everything broke, and when Dale asked for help, the dealer told him it was his fault. That's when the neighbors started paying attention. This is the story of what happened when a dealership protected its reputation by blaming the farmer, and when a community of 12 men decided that wasn't going to stand. If you value stories about loyalty, consequence, and the decisions that define farming communities, this channel exists to preserve them. These aren't dramatized, they're not exaggerated. They're the long, slow weight of choices that take decades to fully understand. Subscribe if that matters to you. We'll be here, telling these stories the way they deserve to be told, without noise, without shortcuts, and without forgetting what was lost along the way. Dale Hoffman farmed 1,400 acres of corn and soybeans outside Tecumseh, Nebraska. His grandfather broke the ground in 1931. His father expanded in the 1970s. Dale took over in 1986 and ran the operation with his wife, Sharon, and their oldest son, Travis, who was 26 in 2012 and planning to take over within the decade. The farm wasn't large by modern standards, but it was paid for. Dale had always been cautious with debt. He bought used equipment when he could, kept machines longer than most, and only financed when the math was certain. But by 2011, his primary tractor, a Case IH MX255 from 2003, was showing its age. The transmission was slipping, hydraulic leaks were constant, fuel efficiency was declining. Dale knew he needed more power for the soil conditions he was working. His fields were heavy. Compaction was becoming a problem. He needed track capability, not just tires. He visited Riverside Case IH in February 2012. The dealership had been in the same family for 38 years. Dale had bought his first tractor there in 1990, a Case IH 7120. He'd bought the MX255 there in 2003. He'd spent thousands on parts, service, and repairs over 2 decades. The relationship felt solid. The sales manager, a man named Gordon Petrie, had been there for 16 years. Dale explained what he needed. Gordon recommended the Quadtrac 500. It was the flagship machine. 532 horsepower, 4 independent rubber tracks, superior traction, advanced hydraulics, precision ready. It was expensive, but Gordon assured him it was worth it. He said the Quadtrac platform was proven. He said Case IH stood behind it. Dale ran the numbers. The financing was tight, but manageable. He placed the order in March. The machine arrived in April. Dale took delivery on a Thursday. The Quadtrac rolled off the trailer and into his machine shed. It was massive, red, gleaming, and intimidating. Travis helped him set the GPS and calibrate the hydraulics. They spent the weekend reading the manual and adjusting settings. On Monday, April 23rd, Dale hooked up his 12-row planter and started working the South 40. The Quadtrac pulled beautifully. The tracks gripped the wet soil without slipping. The cab was quiet. The controls were responsive. Dale felt proud. He felt justified. He thought he'd made the right call. He planted 380 acres that week without issue. On May 2nd, during his second week in the field, the hydraulic pressure warning light came on. Dale shut down immediately and checked the fluid. It was low, significantly low. He couldn't find a visible leak. He called Riverside. A technician came out the next morning, added fluid, and said it was probably just settling. He didn't charge for the visit. Dale went back to work. 3 days later, the light came on again. This time, the technician found a small leak in one of the rear hydraulic lines. He replaced the line under warranty and told Dale it was a manufacturing defect, not uncommon in new machines. Dale accepted that. He finished planting by May 18th. The summer passed quietly. Dale used the Quadtrac for spraying and light tillage. No problems. By August, he'd put 340 hours on the machine. He was starting to trust it again. Then came harvest. On October 9th, 2012, Dale was combining corn in the northwest quarter. The Quadtrac was pulling a grain cart. He was 3 hours into the day when he heard a loud metallic crack from under the cab. The hydraulic system failed completely. The track stopped responding. The machine lurched and shut down. Dale climbed out and saw hydraulic fluid pouring from the undercarriage. It was everywhere, pooling in the stubble, dripping from the frame, running down the tracks. He called Riverside immediately. The service truck arrived 2 hours later. The technician crawled underneath and didn't say anything for a long time. When he stood up, he told Dale the main hydraulic pump had catastrophically failed. Internal components had shattered. Metal shavings were throughout the system. The entire hydraulic assembly would need to be replaced. Dale asked how that was possible. The machine was 6 months old. It had 410 hours. The technician said he didn't know. He said it shouldn't have happened. He towed the Quadtrac back to Riverside. Dale rented a smaller tractor to finish harvest. The repair took 3 weeks. When he picked up the Quadtrac, Gordon Petrie assured him the problem was isolated. He said Case IH had reviewed the failure and determined it was a defective component. Everything was replaced under warranty. Dale didn't pay for parts or labor. He drove the machine home and parked it in the shed. He didn't use it again until spring. In March 2013, Dale began preseason fieldwork. He was running a disc chisel on 180 acres of heavy clay. The Quadtrac performed well for 4 days. On the 5th day, the hydraulic system failed again. Same symptoms, same sudden loss of pressure, same pool of fluid. This time, Dale didn't call right away. He sat in the cab for 20 minutes, staring at the gauges. He felt something he hadn't felt in 30 years of farming, genuine distrust of his equipment. He called Riverside. The technician came out, looked under the machine, and said the hydraulic pump had failed again. Dale asked how. The technician said he didn't know. He said it was unusual. He said they'd have to tear it down again. The Quadtrac went back to Riverside. This time, the repair took 5 weeks. Dale had to rent equipment again to finish spring work. He was behind schedule. His input costs were climbing. When he finally got the Quadtrac back in late April, Gordon Petrie was less reassuring. He said Case IH had reviewed the second failure and found evidence of improper operation. He said the hydraulic system had been overworked. He said Dale might be running the machine too hard or using incompatible implements. Dale asked what that meant. Gordon said the pump failures suggested excessive load. Dale said he was using the same implements he'd always used. Gordon said the Quadtrac was more powerful and required more careful management. The conversation ended without resolution. Dale drove the machine home. He used it cautiously through planting. No problems. But the doubt never left. In October 2013, during the second harvest season, the hydraulic system failed for the 3rd time. Dale was pulling a grain cart again. The machine had 920 hours. The failure was immediate and catastrophic. Fluid everywhere. Complete loss of hydraulic function. Dale didn't call Riverside. He called a hydraulic specialist in Omaha, a man named Ron Kepler, who'd worked on heavy equipment for 40 years. Ron drove out the next morning, crawled under the Quadtrac, and spent 2 hours inspecting the system. When he stood up, he told Dale something was fundamentally wrong with the machine. He said 3 catastrophic pump failures in 18 months wasn't operator error. He said it was design failure, assembly failure, or contamination from the factory. He said Dale needed documentation, and he needed a lawyer. Dale didn't want a lawyer. He wanted the machine fixed. But he also knew he couldn't keep operating this way. He called Gordon Petrie and told him he wanted the Quadtrac replaced. Gordon said that wasn't possible. He said the machine had been repaired under warranty twice. He said Case IH had investigated and found no manufacturing defect. He said the failures were consistent with improper use. Dale asked what he was supposed to do. Gordon said he could trade the machine in, but the trade value would reflect the repair history. Dale asked what that meant. Gordon said maybe $240,000. Dale had financed $387,000 18 months earlier. He still owed $310,000. A trade-in would leave him $70,000 underwater. He'd have to bring cash to the table just to get rid of a lemon. He refused. He told Gordon he wanted a full refund or a replacement machine. Gordon said neither was possible. The conversation ended. Dale hung up and sat at his kitchen table. Sharon asked what he was going to do. Dale said he didn't know. He'd trusted Riverside for 22 years. He'd trusted Case IH for longer. He'd never sued anyone. He'd never filed a complaint. But he also couldn't farm with a $387,000 machine that failed every 6 months. He couldn't afford to keep renting equipment. He couldn't afford to trade in at a massive loss. He felt trapped. That night, he called a lawyer in Omaha named Catherine Marsh. She specialized in agricultural equipment disputes. She listened to his story and asked if he had documentation. Dale said he had every repair invoice, every service record, and every conversation logged. Catherine said that was good. She said Nebraska had a lemon law that covered farm equipment. She said if the same critical system failed 3 times within 2 years, the buyer could demand arbitration. She said it was a long process, but he had a case. Dale didn't decide immediately. He spent 2 weeks thinking. He talked to Sharon. He talked to Travis. He didn't tell anyone else. He knew what a lawsuit would mean. It would mean conflict. It would mean publicity. It would mean standing up in front of people and accusing a dealership he'd trusted for decades of selling him a defective machine and then blaming him for it. It would mean risking relationships, but it would also mean fighting for what was right. On November 14th, 2013, Dale hired Catherine Marsh. She filed a demand for arbitration under Nebraska's lemon law on November 22nd. The hearing was scheduled for March 2014. Riverside Case IH responded through their corporate attorney. They denied the machine was defective. They claimed the failures were caused by operator negligence, improper maintenance, and excessive loading. They claimed Dale had ignored service intervals. They claimed he'd used incompatible implements. They provided no evidence for any of it. But the accusation was public, and in a farming community, accusations stick. Word spread fast. By December, half the county knew Dale Hoffman was suing Riverside Case IH. Opinions divided. Some farmers sympathized. They'd had their own problems with equipment and dealers. But others were skeptical. They said Dale should have been more careful. They said he should have accepted the trade-in. They said lawsuits were bad for everyone. A few people stopped talking to him at the co-op. Dale kept his head down and prepared for the hearing. Catherine Marsh spent 3 months building the case. She collected every repair invoice, every service record, and every communication between Dale and Riverside. She hired Ron Kepler as an expert witness. Ron wrote a detailed report analyzing the 3 hydraulic failures. He concluded that the pump failures was by either a design flaw in the hydraulic cooling system or contamination introduced during assembly at the factory. He ruled out operator error. He ruled out improper maintenance. He said the machine was defective. Catherine also subpoenaed Case IH's internal failure reports. The reports showed that other Quadtrac 500 units from the same production batch had experienced similar hydraulic failures. Case IH had issued a technical service bulletin in late 2012 recommending enhanced hydraulic filtration. Riverside had never informed Dale of the bulletin. They'd never installed the updated filters. The evidence was damning, but Catherine knew the defense would attack Dale's credibility. They'd argue he was careless. They'd argue he pushed the machine too hard. They'd argue he was just looking for a payout. She needed something stronger. She needed corroboration. In February 2014, she drafted a witness request and sent it to Dale. She asked if any other farmers in the area had experience with Riverside Case IH, good or bad. Dale said he didn't want to drag anyone else into it. Catherine said he didn't have to. She said she'd send letters to local farmers explaining the case and asking if anyone was willing to testify about their experiences with Riverside service practices, warranty handling, or equipment sales. Dale was hesitant, but he agreed. Catherine sent letters to 47 farmers in the county. She didn't expect many responses. Most people don't want to get involved in legal disputes. Most people don't want to testify. But 3 days later, she received a call from a farmer named Ed Kleinsasser. Ed was 71 years old. He'd farmed near Tacoma for 50 years. He said he'd bought equipment from Riverside for decades. He said he'd also had problems. He said he'd be willing to testify. Over the next 2 weeks, 11 more farmers called. They didn't all know each other. They weren't organized. But they'd all had similar experiences with Riverside. Some had been denied warranty claims over missed service intervals. Some had been blamed for equipment failures that turned out to be factory defects. Some had been pressured into bad trade-ins. None of them had sued. None of them had complained publicly. But when they heard Dale was fighting back, they wanted to help. Catherine interviewed all 12 farmers. She took statements. She collected documentation. She built a pattern. Riverside Case IH had a history of denying legitimate warranty claims, blaming customers for equipment failures, and protecting their profit margins at the expense of farmer relationships. It wasn't universal. Many customers had positive experiences, but the pattern was real, and the 12 farmers were willing to say so under oath. The arbitration hearing was held on March 18, 2014, in a conference room at the Omaha Livestock Exchange. The arbitrator was a retired district court judge named Harold Simmons. Riverside Case IH sent 2 attorneys, Gordon Petrie, and a regional Case IH representative. Dale brought Catherine Marsh, Ron Kepler, and Sharon. The hearing was supposed to last 1 day. It lasted 3. Catherine opened with Dale's testimony. He walked through the timeline. He explained the 3 failures. He showed the repair invoices. He described the financial damage. He was calm, detailed, and credible. Riverside's attorney cross-examined him for 2 hours. He asked if Dale had read the operator's manual. Dale said yes. He asked if Dale had followed the recommended service intervals. Dale said yes. He asked if Dale had ever overloaded the machine. Dale said no. The attorney tried to rattle him. He didn't succeed. Ron Kepler testified next. He explained the hydraulic system. He explained why 3 catastrophic pump failures in 18 months couldn't be operator error. He walked through the metallurgical analysis. He referenced the Case IH technical service bulletin. He said the machine was defective from the factory. Riverside's attorney challenged his credentials. Ron had 40 years of experience. The challenge went nowhere. Then Catherine called the 12 farmers. One by one, they took the stand. They weren't there to testify about Dale's machine. They were there to testify about Riverside's pattern of behavior. Ed Kleinsasser testified that Riverside had denied a warranty claim on his Case IH Magnum 290 in 2009 because he'd missed a service interval by 8 days, even though the failure was unrelated to maintenance. A farmer named Carl Brunner testified that Riverside had blamed him for a transmission failure on a Steiger 485 that turned out to be a factory defect covered by a recall Riverside never told him about. A farmer named Tom Ostergaard testified that Riverside had pressured his elderly father into a low trade-in after his mother died, then resold the tractor for twice what they'd paid. One after another, the 12 farmers told their stories. They were specific. They were documented. They were credible. Riverside's attorneys tried to discredit them. They argued the testimonies were irrelevant. They argued the farmers were biased. They argued it was a coordinated attack. But the farmers weren't coordinated. They'd never met as a group. They'd simply responded to a letter, and their stories corroborated each other. The pattern was undeniable. On the 3rd day, Judge Simmons asked Riverside's attorneys if they had any evidence that Dale Hoffman had operated the Quadtrac improperly. They did not. He asked if they had any evidence that Dale had ignored maintenance requirements. They did not. He asked why Riverside had never informed Dale of the technical service bulletin. They said it wasn't mandatory. Judge Simmons paused. He reviewed the Case IH internal failure reports. He reviewed Ron Kepler's analysis. He reviewed the 12 farmers' testimonies. Then he issued his ruling. He found that the Case IH Quadtrac 500 sold to Dale Hoffman was defective. He found that Riverside Case IH had failed to disclose known issues with the hydraulic system. He found that Riverside had improperly denied warranty coverage by blaming the buyer without evidence. He ordered Riverside and Case IH to provide Dale with a full refund of $387,000 plus legal fees, plus compensation for rental equipment costs. The total was $421,000. Dale won. Riverside Case IH appealed. The appeal was denied. In June 2014, Dale received a certified check for $421,000. He paid off the loan. He bought a used Steiger 500 from a different dealer 60 miles away. He never set foot in Riverside Case IH again. But the story didn't end there. Within 3 months, 5 of the 12 farmers who testified moved their business to other dealerships. Within 6 months, another 8 followed. Word spread beyond Tecama. Farmers in 3 counties started asking questions about Riverside's warranty practices. Case IH Corporate launched an internal review. In November 2014, Riverside Case IH lost its Case IH franchise certification. The dealership closed in January 2015. The building sat empty for 2 years. In 2017, it was sold and converted into a storage facility. The red Case IH sign was taken down and hauled away. Gordon Petrie left the industry. He moved to Colorado and never worked in farm equipment again. The family that had owned Riverside for 38 years lost everything. The 12 farmers never spoke publicly about their decision to testify. They didn't organize. They didn't celebrate. They simply went back to farming. But among the community, a quiet understanding settled. When a dealer protects itself by blaming the farmer, loyalty ends. And when loyalty ends in a farming community, the damage spreads further than anyone expects. Dale Hoffman is 70 now. He still farms the same 1,400 acres. Travis took over daily operations in 2019. The Steiger 500 Dale bought in 2014 is still running. It has 4,800 hours and no major failures. Dale doesn't talk about the lawsuit often. When asked, he says it wasn't about the money. It was about being called a liar when he knew he'd done everything right. It was about a dealership choosing its reputation over the truth. And it was about 12 men he barely knew driving 4 hours to tell a judge that he wasn't the problem. The Quadtrac was resold by Case IH Corporate through a dealership in Iowa. A farmer named Jim Kellerman bought it in August 2014 for $290,000. He installed the updated hydraulic filters from the Technical Service Bulletin. He's been running it for 10 years. It has 6,200 hours. It's never had a hydraulic failure. The machine wasn't the problem, the dealer was, and the community knew the difference. Sharon Hoffman kept the arbitration ruling framed in their kitchen for 3 years. Then she took it down. She said it reminded her of anger, and she didn't want to hold on to that. But Dale kept the original repair invoices, all 3 of them. They're in a manila folder in his shop, filed under lessons. He doesn't look at them often, but he knows they're there. Because the weight of a betrayal doesn't fade just because you won. It fades when you realize you weren't the only one carrying it. And on March 18, 2014, when 12 farmers walked into that hearing room and sat down in the gallery, Dale Hoffman learned something he hadn't fully understood in 54 years of farming. Loyalty isn't what you give to a dealer. It's what a community gives to each other when someone finally says enough. The Quadtrac incident didn't destroy Case IH. It didn't destroy the brand. But it destroyed one dealership that forgot what farming is built on. Trust isn't earned through handshakes and history. It's earned by standing behind your word when it costs you something. Riverside Case IH chose profit over integrity, and 12 men decided that wasn't acceptable. Not in their county, not to their neighbor, not in front of a judge who'd been farming longer than most of them had been alive. Dale doesn't drive past the old Riverside building anymore. He takes a different route to town. The storage facility doesn't bother him. But the memory of standing in that parts department in April 2012, signing papers for a machine he thought would last 15 years, still sits heavy. Not because he was wrong, but because he trusted the wrong people. And in farming, that mistake can take decades to recover from. He got his money back. He got his justice. But he lost something quieter. He lost the ease of walking into a dealership and believing what they told him. That kind of loss doesn't show up on a balance sheet. It shows up in hesitation, in double-checking, in the small permanent doubt that follows every handshake after betrayal. The 12 farmers went back to their lives. Ed Kleinsasser is 77 now and still farming. Carl Brunner sold his operation in 2018 and moved to Arizona. Tom Ostergaard's son runs the family farm. Most of them never spoke to Dale after the hearing. They didn't need to. They'd done what needed doing, and that was enough. There's no moral here that ties up cleanly. No lesson that makes the story smaller or easier. Dale Hoffman bought a machine that should have worked. It didn't. He asked for help. He was blamed. He fought back. He won. And in the process, a dealership that had served the community for 38 years ceased to exist. Some people say Dale destroyed it. Others say Riverside destroyed itself. Both are true. And neither changes the fact that when the dust settled, one man got his money back, 12 men got to speak the truth, and an entire county learned that silence protects the wrong people. The Case IH Quadtrac 500 wasn't the villain. It was a machine with a fixable flaw. The villain was a dealership that chose to protect its margins by calling a farmer careless. And the hero wasn't Dale Hoffman. The heroes were 12 men who didn't have to get involved, didn't have anything to gain, and drove 4 hours to sit in a hearing room because someone finally asked them to tell the truth. That's what farming communities are built on. Not equipment, not land, not legacy, but the willingness to show up when your neighbor is being called a liar and saying quietly and without drama, "That's not what happened," and we were there. Dale still sees some of the 12 farmers at the co-op. They nod. They don't talk about it. There's nothing left to say. The case is closed. The dealership is gone. The machine is running fine under someone else's name. But the memory remains. And in farming, memory is currency. It's what keeps you cautious. It's what makes you ask questions. It's what reminds you that a name on a building doesn't mean anything if the people behind it don't honor their word. Dale learned that in 2012. Riverside Case IH learned it in 2014, and the 12 farmers who testified already knew it, which is why they showed up.